my day job as opposed to on the nights and weekends, which is when most traditional lawyers get to do the pro bono work, the work that they care about. So the idea was, well, what if we could just do the work we care about as part of the main purpose of the firm? And the firm was built around that. Now, every firm is a business. It's a business first. But that doesn't mean we can't be impact first in terms of how we go about conducting that business.
Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. I'm Richard Metcalf, founder of X Quadrant, and my mission is to help the world's top CEOs and entrepreneurs shift from incremental to exponential progress and create a huge positive impact on our world. Now, that requires you to reinvent yourself and transform your business. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. Is your work interesting or impactful? Today I speak with Chintan Panchal, who found himself trapped in interesting work that wasn't really fulfilling him, wasn't really creating the impact that he wanted. And so he started to think, well, what would happen if I intersected my field of expertise, which is law, with what really excites me, impact? As a result, he has developed a dedicating impact investing practice within his business, RPCK Rastegar Panchal. Actually, that firm has now become synonymous with law and impact. Really interesting conversation, because this is an area of impact we don't often consider. But there are innovations that happen when you bring the two together. New things become possible for entrepreneurs and for investors. And Chintan's on a mission to build new legal frameworks and new structures that allow new things to emerge in this space. And we talk about various aspects of this in this interview, especially around moving from a project mindset to a paradigm mindset, and to make this shift from just doing interesting work to really making an impact. So enjoy this conversation with Chintan Panchal. Hi, Chintan, and welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Richard.
So Chintan, it's a real pleasure to speak to you today. You and I, we've had several conversations over the last few months. You're now part of my CEO program, Rivendell, which is an exciting bunch of world-changing leaders. And I do consider you to be a world-changing leader. As we were starting this show, I was kind of thinking, is there a good lawyer joke I could use, right? You probably had too many lawyer jokes over your life. But actually, you're a hard person to put into a box, because you're this intersection between corporate law, corporate finance and law on one hand, and a real desire for impact and mission on the other. And probably most people, when they think of a lawyer, that's not the kind of person that they imagine. And I know that at your company, which you founded or co-founded, RPCK Rastegar Panchal, you have really created an impact-first, impact-focused law firm. So I guess my first question is, how can you marry those two together? It sounds like law is a very traditional sector, very bound by rules. How do you kind of reimagine it to be impact-first?
Yeah, no, I love the question. I would add one more kind of box I don't fit into neatly, which is that of a traditional lawyer. And I think that's a key part of the answer to this question of kind of how we've been able to be, to become what we are, right? This idea that, I guess in some ways they say, right, if you graduate from university and you are entrepreneurial, or you're good at math, you go to business school. And if you're not, and you're more into philosophy and history, you go to law school. But I am entrepreneurial and I really like philosophy and history. And I went to law school. But I do have a different relationship with risk and risk taking than I think a lot of, kind of my colleagues in the profession do, which is something that led me to become an entrepreneur. And being an entrepreneur and having an independent firm has allowed me to also have clear vision and a clean slate for how the firm would be envisioned and would develop and grow into what it is today, right? And so, what does all that mean? I would say, kind of very simply, the founding idea, purpose of RPCK is to as a firm make a serious dent in the most important or persistent challenges that we face as a society today. That's the purpose of the firm. Why is that the purpose of the firm? Because that's what I've always wanted to do. That's where I find meaning. That's where I find purpose. That's kind of what I think I'm here for. And the firm started out as a solo practice, right? This was just an idea at about 14, almost coming to the day 14 years ago. And it was born out of a desire to be able to just do the impactful, meaningful, purposeful work in my day job, as opposed to on the nights and weekends, which is when most traditional lawyers get to do the pro bono work, the work that they care about. And so the idea was, well, what if we could just do the work we care about as part of the main purpose of the firm? And the firm was built around that. Now, every firm, it is a business. It's a business first. But that doesn't mean we can't be impact first in terms of how we go about conducting that business.
Well, let me jump in on this, because I'm kind of curious. How did you? Because obviously you've said, well, you want to change, make a big dent in the most persistent issues facing, our world, and that's a huge thing. So, what do you think is the unique contribution of law to that process, right? So how do you believe as a law firm that you can kind of move the needle?
So I think of the law as this kind of invisible webbing, this connective fiber that exists between all of us, right? And so what do I mean by that, right? So, well, there is the baseline, right? There are the laws that govern us, and those are the constraints around what we can do, right? You can't steal and rob and harm people, etc., right? You can, you have your various different levels of freedoms, but then there are these constraints within which we operate. That becomes more and more complex, right? We engage in economic activity, and there's regulatory laws and regulations that guide and constrain us, right? And then there's the interpersonal, right? You and I decide that we want to build something together. I want to finance you, or you want to, we're going to for a new enterprise, or enter into a contract, for services or whatever, right? All of those instances I just described, I think of as this connective webbing, right? This fiber that lives between us. And so lawyers are effectively the weavers of that fiber. And sometimes those lawyers, work in government and are legislators, or many times the lawyers that most of us interact with are in private practice, and they see and understand and study and sometimes work to craft.
So Chintan, let me kind of summarize what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that what you see the opportunity is really in terms of building, let's say, contractual frameworks or ecosystem relationships that allow people to operate in different ways, perhaps from how traditional law might.
That's exactly right. Right. And so in this space, right, in the impact space, there are different dimensions to these relationships that people are building, right? There's, an impact investor and a social entrepreneur get together, and it's not the exact same thing as a regular investor and a regular entrepreneur, right? There's another dimension to what they're talking about, what they're expecting, what they're looking to do, and how they view success, and how they're going to measure it and how they're going to reward it, right? All of those dynamics have a financial bottom line or a financial dimension to them, and then they have the various different impact dimensions to them as well, right? So now all of a sudden that fiber that exists between those two individuals is, 3, 4, 5 different, kind of strands to it. And so the question then becomes, what does that relationship look like, right? And law, I think, is in many ways the practice of helping build and construct and reinforce relationships between people and institutions and organizations.
So can you give me an example of like an innovation that perhaps, or something that's become possible because of the way that you approach this?
Absolutely. So a couple that come to mind. One that I'd love to, kind of dive into, which I think is super relevant and kind of, a little bit more cutting edge, is just the advent of new types of financing structures for social enterprises, social entrepreneurs, or impact businesses. Okay. So historically, and in the impact investing space, people, investors would look at new businesses, young businesses, businesses or investment opportunities that exist in emerging or otherwise challenging markets, and look at them with a lens of a venture capitalist. Why? Because a venture capitalist does something similar. A venture capitalist looks at a nascent company that has unlimited upside potential and also unlimited downside potential, and a high likelihood of failure, just given kind of statistics, and is also very asset light, right? So, if you're a new company startup founder, it's highly unlikely that you can go to the bank and have a bank finance anything that you've done, because you're just getting started, right? And so that dynamic, that unlimited upside and significant downside dynamic, exists in a lot of areas and corners of the impact space. And so as a result, venture capital has been a dominant mode of financing. But that's only one dimension of venture capital, right? Venture capital also depends on stratospheric, multiple growth in order for the business model to work. It requires an exit opportunity within 7, maybe 10 years. If you stretch it a bit, it requires a change of control, right? Like an IPO or a sale of the business, right? And so those are two dimensions that do not make any sense, may not be desirable, or may not even be possible for the vast majority or a significant number of impact businesses, because they're brick and mortar businesses, because there is no IPO market in that space, or because the entrepreneur doesn't intend to sell the business, or because it doesn't, that type of business or that market doesn't support multiple level growth kind of year over year, right? So there's these disconnects, right? So there's a reason that people have been kind of using venture, and then there's all these reasons why venture maybe doesn't work. And so what folks have done, and we've been able to be a part of this, is to really dive into these business relationships and look at the elements of them, and sometimes think about other financing models that have been used in other parts of the market historically, or actually just develop new structures kind of from whole cloth to help document and support these types of relationships. And so what am I talking about, right? So revenue linked finance is a good example of this, right? So the idea that an investor can't take a security interest and needs a multiple kind of return, but at the same time you need to be able to manufacture an exit opportunity for the investor, because it's not forever capital, right? And so we developed a self-redeeming equity instrument, right? So basically half venture capital style investment, half redeemable equity or loan style kind of repayment, right? But it allows the investor to get a multiple. It allows the investor and the entrepreneur to have a conversation up front as to what a reasonable multiple is, right? As opposed to just a question mark, and hopefully it's 10x or more, right? Maybe it's 4x, maybe it's 5x, maybe it's 2, 3, whatever the number is for that particular business. So it's customizable to that opportunity. And it's flexible. It's based on what the actual success of that enterprise is and how it goes about, right? So the idea that you can develop a new mode of documenting, structuring, reinforcing, and rewarding a relationship between two parties who are looking to come together to make an investment and get a return, but also make an investment and generate impact is the driver behind developing something like this.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so we went into some detail there, but actually start to see, that there are ways of setting up financing, for example, in a way that actually works in the impact space and perhaps creates new options. You're right. VC can give you a whole bunch of advantages in terms of access to that risky capital, but is it actually aligned with what the founder is trying to do when they set up their business in the first place, right, to make the difference? Right.
And you mentioned two really important concepts there, and I just want to kind of echo. One is options, right? There's nothing inherently good, bad, or otherwise about VC. It's just a question of, is it the right fit for the opportunity? And then the other is intentions, right? Kind of, what are we trying to achieve? And that is the thing that I think sometimes missing from the analysis and from the conversation and from, and a lot of relationships are trying to achieve something over here, but are built on a framework that's maybe over here. That's not quite the right fit for that framework, right? So the idea is really to do that, right? To kind of say, all right, there are lots of tools available in the workshop. And which one should we use? What are we trying to achieve? All right, well, let's make sure the tool or the structure is purpose built and actually fits for the relationship we're trying to build.
So Chintan, let's dive into the story of how you built the business, because obviously you started pretty much by yourself, and you're now able to compete with businesses that are 50 times your size. So how have you managed to kind of establish yourself in this space with such a high level?
It's a good question. I can take a stab at it. I think part of it starts with just your intentions, right? What are you trying to achieve, right? For me, I think that my intentions are maybe more in line with the ultimate intentions and the goals of the people that we work with, or the people that reach out to us. And that's a key difference, right? It's also part of the reason why I think that a firm like ours is just inherently different from a lot of the firms that are out there. I came from a brilliant, a firm that's, exceptionally successful in its particular model, but I don't think that this business and this philosophy can fit or live within a model like that, right? The reason being that the way I think about kind of purpose, right? I talked about, right? Kind of purpose of the firm is to have an impact in the world. It's different, right? It's different from most of the traditional legacy businesses out there, right? The purpose of those businesses, those firms, right? The purpose is to maximize profits for the owners of that business. And that's a very normal thing, right? It's a very, that's kind of Milton Friedman, 101. But at that fundamental level, the purpose is just different. And so the way I think about it is, right, so my purpose is to really have an impact on the things that I care about, and to build a home, a place where people, professionals who have like-minded philosophy and goals can come and practice their trade as well, right? To really be a place that supports that in furtherance of our goal. And if we're successful, if we're good at what we do and we're consistently good at what we do, then we'll be financially rewarded. We'll be able to build a sustaining business, and we'll be able to get paid and live our lives and do what we do. But I never thought I needed like 6 houses and 2 boats and a helicopter, and none of those things. Like, man, I have a nice house and our families, lives comfortably, and we're we're perfectly happy in the life that we have, and we're fortunate to have it. But what I'm trying to articulate is kind of this difference of focus.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, Chintan, is it's simply you resonate with your people, right? That you have a same, you have a common sense of purpose. I mean, probably why reason that we resonate while we're working together now is because I think you have a same story in the sense that I know when you set up your business, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you kind of hedged your bets a bit. You're like, okay, I'm going to just be a lawyer and like, we'll see where it goes. And at some point.
Yeah, when I started, I was like, all right, let's see if this thing can work. And I was like, I will just do whatever comes in the door.
Right, there you go. Yeah. So most of us, when we start a business, it's like, if they have a pulse and they have a wallet, it's my target customer.
Yeah, right. I can provide value, right?
But in my own story, I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't want to just help somebody get a promotion up the corporate ladder or just, maximize this quarter's EBITDA so that, their board's okay. I don't mind helping people with those things. But for me, it's like, in order to do what? And so that's when I got clear. If I'm going to do this, I may as well help people change the world, right? That's what I want to do. That's what I believe in. It's what sets me on fire. But there is that moment where you have to kind of go, okay, I'm all in this direction. So when was that moment for you? When did you get to the point of going, you know what, this is it. This is what I'm all about.
It came kind of simultaneously when, I got to the point where I felt like, okay, I've learned the trade. I know kind of, I know what it is to do this job and to do it well, right? So for lawyers and for folks that may not know, kind of law school doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer, right? It doesn't actually teach you the first thing about how to be a lawyer, right? It teaches you how to think and blah, blah, blah. It's basically a philosophy degree. And then you have to get out and you actually have to spend a chunk of your early career, right? 5, 7, 10 years learning the trade, right? Kind of learning the structures and the documents and the negotiation and the nuances and how it all fits and tax and regulatory, whatever your discipline is within the law, right? And so for me, I got to a point where I was starting to feel pretty comfortable and was leading. I was being given lots of opportunities to lead matters and to really run deals and transactions and all this kind of stuff. And then you get an opportunity to kind of just rise above the clouds for a moment and just kind of see the horizon, and you can kind of you get an opportunity to kind of get out of the micro detail of learning and doing, right? And you get to think. And for me, that moment coincided with, a realization that I had achieved a goal that I had set out to achieve when I was a young kid. I was probably 12, 13, 14. Everyone asks you, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I didn't have a great answer. My parents are, kind of traditional, professions for immigrants from India, kind of doctor and engineer. And neither one of those was the fit for me. And so I thought becoming an international lawyer would be cool. And so I just stuck with that. And that's what, many years later, kind of fast forward to this moment, I kind of realized, okay, I know what I'm doing. And holy cow, I think I've achieved that thing that I set out to do. And then you look around and you see, okay, well, what's the point? Like, is this the life that I want to live? This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my career? Am I going to just become one of the people that I work with and one of these colleagues, right? Is that what's set out for me? And for some people, that's really what they're excited about and that's what they want to do. And for me, it wasn't. And it kind of felt empty, right? I said, well, what's the point? I'm just helping really, really successful, kind of like the historical winners of every kind of competitive economic system continue to win, and moving large piles of money from here to there and there to there and there to there, and people are squeezing out a couple bucks, in the process, and the law firm is getting paid exceptionally well to do these really complicated cross-border, multi-dimensional things, right? So intellectually, it's super interesting.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to remind you that my book, Making Time for Strategy, is now available. If you want to be less busy and more successful, I highly recommend that you check it out. Why not head over to makingtimeforstrategy.com to find out the details. Now, back to the conversation. I think that's a great point there, just to point. When I work with chief executives or entrepreneurs who are not quite clear on like the impact they really want to make and not really on fire, I think that question around intellectual stimulation is a trap. In other words, they enjoy what they're doing because it gets the brain cells firing, but in their heart, they know it's kind of a bit pointless and that they're a bit bored.
A good point. Yeah, it's such a good point, right? So many of us, we kind of conflate those two, right? Something that's interesting and challenging, right? It's a challenge. It's a present challenge. You can apply your mind to it and kind of, and meet that challenge and accomplish it, right? So there's that near term or micro kind of accomplishments that are important. But I think what you're kind of drawing a distinction around is, okay, that's cool, but also what's the big picture and what does it all mean and how does it all fit together and where is it taking you? And, one way of thinking about it, right, that a lot of times people kind of think about is like, all right, well, you're 90 years old and you're like looking back on your life, and are you going to remember like all those little deals that were really interesting and challenging, and or are you going to say, well, what was the grand arc of my life?
Yeah, I think the distinction is, is it interesting or is it impactful, right? I think that's exactly it, and it can be. I've been there, like what could be interesting. You were down a little rabbit hole doing something quite interesting. It's firing the brain cells, but then when you step back, as you said, and think, well, what's the legacy I'm creating with this? You guys, it's like, man, did I do all that education and all that, have acquired all that experience just for this? And again, for some people, that's the game they want to play. But I think probably for people listening to this podcast or for people who want to play that game with very exponential impact, that's not enough. But what I find, the same for you, is that actually when you get clear on a big mission, it actually becomes way more interesting because it's such a huge mission that you want to go on. It's like, well, that's completely another next level compared with what I was thinking about before. And this particular one deal, well, now I'm thinking about how to change the world in some dimension. So actually what's funny is that the interests can kind of keep us stuck in almost like a local maximum, where it's kind of interesting enough to kind of distract us. There's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, right? It's interesting enough to distract us. The other thing I'm thinking about is, right, that impact doesn't mean the same thing for all of us, right? Kind of you and I happen to be aligned in terms of a lot of ways that we think about this concept of impact, right? And we have a broad-based kind of, world-focused, and change-driven kind of definition, maybe. And I think some people can think about impact in their local community or their group or their tribe or, their family, et cetera. And that, I think, also gets confused sometimes, right? Because sometimes a lot of us, I was one of those people, right? And so that you just kind of assume, all right, well, what I'm doing in the day-to-day, in the grind, is helpful to my family. I'm providing for my family. I create jobs for my employees, right? Whatever, right? These kinds of things are a lot of. This is the way that a lot of us think, right? A lot of folks think, and there's, I want to kind of draw out this point a little bit because, on the one hand, right, the impact is not prescriptive, right? It's not like for me to say, all right, well, you should have this impact, you should care about that thing, or you should want to achieve this goal or that, right? We set that for ourselves. But then what does impact even mean? Because if everything is impactful, then kind of nothing is, right? And I think that it's actually really, going back to the point that you made, it's being clear about what that truly means, right? Like having an impact, right? Like, okay, do I actually want to change or build or grow something that is bigger than me and do I care about something that's more than just what I have to do to survive?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of an impact radius, I call it, right? So clearly, first level of radius is like your own personal survival. Often we tend to over-index that. I was talking with somebody the other day, actually a bunch of CEOs, and they were kind of talking about basically all the things they had to get in place before they did the thing they really wanted to do, as if they hadn't got a big enough stash of money right now. And so that can kind of keep us back, right? But obviously, if literally our own survival is at stake, we're probably going to focus on that. And then after ourselves, we've probably got our family, right? Providing for your family, right? Important, of course, right? You don't want to be going on a mission and see, your family falling apart and not putting food on the table, of course. Otherwise, your mission becomes a millstone. But you got the second radius, which is your family, and then you start to get, to your company, right? You keep your company afloat. Allow it to actually have the oxygen to do what it does, right? But then you start to go beyond that, right? Like change your industry, change your country, change the world, change the way people think, or whatever it is. And as you said, it's not specifically a right or wrong, but the question is, you've got one wild and wonderful life. What game do you want to play? Simple as that, right? What game do you want to play? And go and play the game that you want to play rather than the game that you feel you need to play, or, situations mean that you have to play. Actually,
absolutely. And I also think it's a privilege to be able to play the game, right? There's so many folks in the world who are just perpetually stuck in kind of radius level 1, right? Kind of provide, kind of personal security, right? And that's actually something that I think is a worthy impact goal in and of itself, right? Kind of development and the opportunity for, there's a saying out there. One of the CEOs that I work with, uses this a lot, right? Which is that brilliance is equally distributed, but opportunity isn't, right? So there's so many folks out there that given the time and the space and the chance, can do so much, but oftentimes they aren't given that chance, right? And I think that's, in terms of impact objectives, right? Kind of just creating opportunity for folks who never had it, or wouldn't otherwise have had it. That it's super compelling, but it is a and I think with that privilege comes a bit of a responsibility. Again, not being prescriptive, but understanding that there's a responsibility to take that seriously and to think about that and say, well, what can my contribution be in this world?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I'm realizing there's so much we could talk about here. We could go a long way. But I'm seeing time ticking away. I do have a couple of key questions I really want to ask you. My favorite questions on the show, actually, which is, first of all, like, what does multiplying your impact look like over the coming years? So if we're coming back, if you come back in 2 or 3 years and you say, wow, can't believe it, this is where we are now, what would that look like for you?
I love it. I think there are 2 dimensions to that I think about a lot. And the first one is in this realm of innovation, right? It's a big part of our ethos and kind of what we do and how we go about doing it, and who we are as a firm, innovation, right? And so if we are able to develop through innovation, through kind of trial and error, through academic work that we do, through kind of practical work that we do, if we're able to develop some of the structures that prove to be actually quite useful to driving and leveraging and growing impact, and they become adopted and utilized because they are inherently helpful and useful, then I think we've actually created something that in and of itself, it is a impact multiplier because people can use it. And when we think about what we're creating and how we're going about building something new, we're thinking about that, right? Like, can this unlock, can this magnify, can this turbocharge, can this accelerate impactful outcomes, right? So that, so that's kind of the one piece of it, right? So it's like,
well, Chintan, let me actually just give you a framework coming to my mind as you talk about that. It sounds like it's like possibly a 2 or even 3 stage shift for you. So it sounds like there's projects, right? Which is doing the deals one by one, classic lawyer behavior, right? Doing the deals, working with clients, classic consulting behavior as well, right? That's what we do. But projects to then either products, right? More standardized, but possibly what I'm hearing is even beyond that and more to paradigms, right? So the product might be that you can scale certain ways of doing things and be a go-to firm in certain financing structures, right? Fantastic. That's productized. And then the final one is the paradigm, which is actually changed the way that people think more globally. You might not always be involved in that, but you've fundamentally changed the way people look at opportunities. And I think for you, that's
to write that down because I think that's exactly spot on. Yeah. Love it. Okay. So some of the projects, so I'll maybe put it this way, right? So if some subset of the projects that we work at can become paradigm shifters, can paradigm changers in and of themselves, right? We don't expect all of them will, but if some of them can, then I think we've achieved a dimension of what you're talking about, right? Something we care. The other side of it is people, right? Kind of if we can inspire other professionals who are at the top of their game to look at and understand that this way of practicing your trade exists, and this opportunity to kind of manifest your own kind of purpose and what's meaningful to you exists, right? You can do this in your work. You can do it right here, right now. You don't have to wait until, you've bought your third house and whatever, you achieved XYZ in your bank account or whatever. You don't have to wait. You can do this now in your work, right? You can take what you're great at and actually apply it to something you care about, right? That idea, if we can help inspire through our example, just saying we're doing it and it's successful and it's great and it's actually really fun and wonderful. And other people are able to kind of take that and do it in their own way. Some of those people, can find a home here, right? But we can't be a home to everyone, right? But the idea is that this philosophy, this idea is much bigger than us or any of the people in the space, right? So that's one. And then two is kind of, there is actually a different style and mode and philosophy and technical approach to the work itself, right? The work, as we talked about at the top of this conversation, it's not just saying, all right, I'm going to take this thing that already exists off the shelf and just apply it to this group of people because they're kind of like that group of people. And, it's not just throwing products at people, right? And so and this is something that is an ambition of mine that I haven't yet been able to kind of realize, is for us to become a teaching institution ourselves, and actually help really kind of contribute to the body of knowledge in the space of how you do this and how you do it well. And I think it's critical for this philosophy to thrive and flourish for the all of the people that are required to take these ideas and bring them.
Yeah. And perhaps that is back to the paradigm thing, right? Perhaps that teaching institution is the way in which you start to scale your thinking beyond the individual clients that you work with. So Chintan, it's a great conversation. I know we could spend a lot longer. The good news is at least the two of us, we get to talk on a much more regular basis. So we'll be able to explore more of this. But for the purposes of this conversation, tell me, what's it going to take for you to multiply your impact, right? So for the firm to do these things, right, to create these new paradigms, to perhaps create this teaching institution, you're going to need to change your own success formula, right? And reinvent yourself in some way. So what's going to be the edge, would you say, for you as you look at being the kind of person that can deliver on that level?
Well, that's a tough one. That's kind of the question, isn't it? Kind of like, who do I need to become in order to achieve the things that I'm dreaming about? There's many different dimensions to it, right? And I don't know if any one of them is the one thing, but I'll kind of just talk
Yeah, what comes to mind now in this moment? I mean, there could be different things, but my goal is to help with your thinking on this. Like, what's an area?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think I've been successful at so far in my journey is getting out of kind of the day to day of working in the business, and I can work on the business. Right? But I need to be able to become the best leader of this business that I can. And I don't think anywhere by any means I'm anywhere near that yet. I need to become a more effective leader, right? And that kind of starts with vision all the way down through execution and reinforcement of the vision, and kind of integrating these ideas into a flow and a process, and right, and there's a lot of that I still am learning, how to do and how to do well. I think that I have to be able to communicate well, kind of who we are and what we do to the world, very, very clearly, both from the perspective of helping us get in front of people who we can actually help, and so that we can partner with them to actually create amazing things that we may not have even thought of yet. And the other is to get in front of folks who can help us do this work, right? Kind of the universe of brilliant, professionals out there. And so that's, I think in a nutshell, if I can lead my organization of exceptionally talented, very, very smart, and translate to difficult to lead professionals, right? The leading isn't like, okay, you must do this, and that's not how just doesn't work, right? And if I'm able to, it kind of goes back to something earlier, right? This isn't in a vacuum, right? It's a highly competitive environment, right? There's no barrier to entry for every other, firm and kind of big, small, solo, etc., to dive into the space. And in fact, that's something that I'm hoping will happen from the big picture perspective, right? But that has to be in balance with something that sometimes is at odds with that, right? Which is the ability to compete and compete well, compete effectively, right? Like, I want to have a lot of competition, but then I want to be able to compete effectively within all that competition, right? The easier thing to really like, all right, well, we're the only people in the space that can do this, and but that doesn't achieve anything other than kind of a very nearsighted, small goal of kind of financial success in the short term, right? There is a bigger vision and perspective on this that I think is achievable.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for kind of sharing some of those edges, right? As you kind of think about how you manage your team and offer them that bigger vision of what's possible. Because you're right, like you're somebody who's on a big mission, and that is going to require reinventing yourself in different ways as you go for this. My suspicion actually is that, yes, rising up your leadership skills in your business will be one thing, but probably at some point you will actually, to do what you want to do, possibly even have to decouple your own impact from that of your business to change the world at the level that you're interested in. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that emerges.
I don't expect that I'll always necessarily be the right leader for this firm at every stage of our growth, right? If we're here where we are right now, this is my role, and this is kind of what I do. But just like I've been able to get out of a lot of the day-to-day of the work and really kind of focus on kind of the innovative dimensions to a lot of the things that we do, I think that maybe the day will come where the firm is much bigger than me, and then its impact and my impact are two different things.
Well, hey, Chintan, it's been great to chat. If people want to get in touch with you or find out about the business, where do they do that?
So the website is www.rpck.com, and I'm at Chintan, Chintan, at rpck.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Chintan Panchal, and those are probably the best ways to get in touch. And I'm always interested in interacting with brilliant and like-minded people.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I love this dive we've done today on this intersection, right, between law and impact, and the way that you're innovating to make contractual frameworks, financing, more aligned with what people are trying to do when they are on a mission, when they have a purpose. I think that's been really interesting, looking at that, about the games we want to be playing, about how wide our impact radius is. I think this idea of how you move from, or starting to move from projects all the way to paradigms, and your ambitions around teaching people, mobilizing people around a movement, which is, I think, is fascinating. So it's been a fun conversation. I look forward to following along in the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Richard. It's been fun.
Well, that's a wrap. If you received value from this conversation, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'd deeply appreciate it. And if you'd like to check out the show notes from this episode, head to xquadrant.com/podcast, where you'll find all the details. Now, finally, when you're in top leadership, who supports and challenges you at a deep level to help you multiply your impact? Discover more about the different ways we can support you at xquadrant.com.